Welcome, and thank you for joining us today for this special event webinar regarding the 2019 coronavirus disease. My name is Joshua Kroll, and I am the Director of Sales and Marketing of Evexia Diagnostics, and also your host for this presentation. Our topic today is COVID-19, Immune Preparedness Against an Imminent Threat, and will be presented by Dr. Wayne Sedano, the Director of Clinical Support and Education of Evexia Diagnostics. Also, special thanks to our two contributors, Dr. Kevin Bodling, President and CEO of Evexia Diagnostics, and Dr. Will Blankenship, Chief Medical Officer of Evexia Diagnostics. Now, without further ado, Dr. Wayne Sedano.
Hi, this is Dr. Sedano. Welcome to the webinar that discusses the coronavirus 19 disease and provides information about methods to support the immune system. So first and foremost, please be aware that the information about this virus is very fluid, and therefore, as new research presents, the information is most likely going to change to some degree. So I recommend visiting the CDC website from time to time to keep up with the latest information. It's extremely helpful, and you see the website on this slide. So what are these coronaviruses? Well, these viruses, they're a large group of viruses that consist of a core of genetic material that's going to be surrounded by a core of protein spikes, as you see on the slide, and that's going to give a crowned appearance. Corona means crown. And I want you to be aware that different types of coronaviruses can cause different types of symptoms, as you see on the slide. Respiratory symptoms, they can range from the common cold to pneumonia, but most people experience mild symptoms, and there can also be gastrointestinal symptoms. Now, there are some coronaviruses that can cause severe diseases, such as SARS, which stands for Severe Acute Respiratory Syndrome, and that was identified in China way back in 2003. Also, MERS, which stands for Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, and that was identified in Saudi Arabia in 2012. Now, according to the World Health Organization, in December 2019, there was a cluster of pneumonia cases in China, which was caused by a previously unknown virus, which they named the 2019 coronavirus because this was a new virus. Now, the disease can spread from those infected to family members and to healthcare staff. And most cases are in China, but as you know by now, it has spread through other parts of the world. Now, in regard to the fatality percentage, it is undetermined as of this writing. So now I want to talk about the origin of the virus. So the epicenter, like I just said, appears to be the seafood market in Wuhan, China. Now, the coronavirus circulates in a range of animals and sometimes can be transmitted to humans in what's called spillover. Now, I want to talk a little more about spillover, zoonotic spillover. So what's that? Now, that's that transmission of a pathogen from a vertebrate animal to a human, and it does present a global public health burden, but it's poorly understood phenomenon. So I want you to keep that in mind. And this type of spillover, it's going to require several factors to kind of line up, and that's going to include the ecological, the epidemiological, and behavioral determinants of the pathogen exposure, and also the within human factors that affect susceptibility to the disease. And moreover, spillover can be caused by mutations of the virus and/or increased contact between humans and animals. And there's a couple examples that I have on the slide. The MERS coronavirus, that's associated with camels. And as you see, the SARS virus was associated with what's known as civet cats, as you see on the lower right hand of this slide. In regard to the animal reserve for the Corona-19 virus, it's yet to be determined. So got to hang in there for more research. Now, this slide shows some of the big questions to keep in mind that may or may not be answered and may take a while for them to be answered. So I want to go over those step by step. So what is the velocity of the spread on the top? Will the case fatality rate increase or decrease? Again, no one knows. Is this a disease of season? In other words, a seasonal diseases. Are current antiviral drugs effective? Right now, they are not as of this writing. Are there especially vulnerable subpopulations? Yes, I'm going to be talking about that. Do simple interventions provide effective or meaningful protection? And I'll talk about that as well. But remember that most cases are in China, like I said, and they are spreading throughout the world at this particular time. Next is the transmission of this SARS-CoV-2 virus. So basically, it's yet to be determined, but they do know that droplets from infected persons via coughing or sneezing, as well as contaminated surfaces, is a vehicle for transmission. So you need to keep that in mind. Now, in regard to the at-risk population, I mean, I mentioned that, but just to put it in on one slide for you to take a good look at, remember it's healthcare professionals caring for the infected individuals, also family members, those in close contact with animals, and certainly individuals with compromised immune systems and those with chronic health conditions. Those are the ones that are more than likely to have an increased risk of getting this virus. So I want you to consider the health of the individual if there's any coexisting or chronic health conditions, as you see outlined in the slide: cardiovascular, heart disease, lung disease, kidney disease, diabetes, and so forth. These can all influence and increase the risk of the sequela of this virus. Next, I want to talk about what the CDC has outlined in regards to the current risk assessment. So I'm going to go bullet by bullet here, and because this is what they recently wrote. So for most of the American public who are likely to be exposed to this virus at this time, the immediate health risk is considered low, but again, that could be changing. So people in communities where ongoing community spread of the virus that causes this disease has been reported at an elevated risk. Next, healthcare workers caring for patients with this virus, of course, are at an elevated risk, and individuals with personal contact, and those of travel, and I think you know that by now, particularly international locations. I know cruise ships, there's been problems in Italy, and certainly different parts throughout the world. So you need to keep an eye on that. In regard to the symptomatology, now the symptoms can include a cough, possibly with a fever and shortness of breath, but there are some early reports of non-respiratory symptoms such as nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea, so please keep that in mind. Most people recover within a few days. However, some people, and again, this is that subpopulation, particularly the elderly who have a weakened immune system, they may develop a more severe infection such as bronchitis and pneumonia and can lead to eventual death. Now, in regard to illness severity, the CDC did comment on that. And as you know, probably know, at least by now, both the MERS-CoV and SARS-CoV have been known to have severe illness or cause severe illness in individuals. But the CDC report that the complete picture of this new virus, the COVID-19, is not fully understood yet, as you could imagine. So as I stated on the previous slide, the reported illnesses have ranged from mild to severe, including death. So now let's take a look at the patient characteristics concerning this condition. In other words, who is most likely to get this particular condition? So they have figured out through, and you see there's a Lancet report recently, February of 2020, and this comes from that data, that the average age appears to be in the middle 50s. About 50% had prior or long-standing chronic conditions such as cardiovascular disease, cerebrovascular disease, endocrine dysfunction, especially diabetes, and gastrointestinal disease. And this virus is more likely to affect older adult males with chronic comorbidities as a result of a depressed immune system. So you definitely need to keep that in mind. But at this point, I know that you're aware of the ongoing investigation, and this is a rapidly evolving situation, and the information will be updated as it becomes available. So you got to hang in there and do your research on this and searched in that, particularly the CDC. So in regard to diagnostics, I have them outlined on the slide for you here. PCR testing, that stands for polymerase chain reaction. What that will do is give a genetic fingerprint of the virus. And luckily, as of I believe it was about a week ago, there is lab testing available for this virus. It's now available. This is the LabCorp test that is listed on this slide, certainly available through Evexia. It's the 2019 novel coronavirus, and the procedure is what's known as NAA, and that stands for nucleic acid amplification. The test number is on here. The specimen that you need to acquire, it's a nasopharyngeal swab. Now you need to do that in office. You don't go to the lab to have this done, so keep that in mind. And then the swab is put in what's known as a universal transmedia, and then that gets sent to the lab. The turnaround time is about 3 to 4 days. Now I want to talk for a moment about some of the findings of basic lab testings on individuals that were infected that can give you a clue. Now again, this is basic, looking at the CBC, with DIF, and also looking at the comprehensive metabolic panel. So what did they find? Well, I have it listed here on the slide. The main thing, the main analytes on these lab tests were abnormal liver enzymes. They were elevated. No surprise there. There was a high neutrophil count and a low lymphocyte count on the DIF. In most cases, had elevated C-reactive protein. So that is like the picture on the basic lab test for you to take a look at. Now, this is a quote, a recent quote, by the way, from the Center for Disease Control, the Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report. So I'm just going to go ahead and just read that out to you. The CDC is developing a serological test to assist with surveillance for the SARS-CoV-2 circulating in U.S. population. The test detects antibodies, in other words, immunoglobulins, IgG, IgA, and IgM, indicating that there is virus exposure or past infection. And the CDC, in addition, their laboratories are also developing assays to detect the SARS-CoV-2 viral RNA and antigens in tissue specimens. So there's a lot going on. Like I said, this is an evolving and a very, very fluid topic. With regard to specific treatment, I think you know by now that there are no specific pharmaceuticals that appear to be effective. Supportive care is needed. Vaccines are in the developmental stage. And recently, 2 articles in Lancet Infectious Disease, just want to review those. They say to date, no specific treatment has been proven to be effective against the SARS-CoV-2 infection. And on the bottom, convalescent plasma and immunoglobulins have been used as a last resort to improve the survival rate of patients with SARS whose condition continued to deteriorate despite treatment with pulsed methylprednisolone. So the essence of this article is immunoglobulin therapy. In other words, immunoglobulins taken from individuals that have had the disease and putting them into those that are deteriorating pretty rapidly and see if that will help. So again, this is a fluid situation. So preventive measures. What can we do? What can we tell our patients? What can we tell our clients on what to do? And I have them listed here on the slide. Standard hygiene practices, covering your mouth and nose. Use a medical mask certainly can be helpful. Flexed elbow, you want to avoid contact with infected individuals. Hand washing, and more hand washing. Alcohol-based scrubs, extremely helpful. Clean surfaces. A lot of those Lysol and other things, other those wipes, which I like to use, work extremely well. You want to cook your food thoroughly, and you certainly want to seek medical care early, especially if you've been traveling and have those travel records with you, so the healthcare professionals can keep track of what's going on with the spread of this virus. Extremely important. Now, I want to talk about contributing factors to immune system dysfunction, and there are a lot, which is going to leave individuals vulnerable not only to this virus, but other infections and viruses if the immune system is not working properly. The troops are not up for the battle to handle pathogens and other things that can get into the system. Therefore, you become more susceptible. I've outlined many conditions that you might want to review with your patient or think about. Are there any nutritional deficiencies? If pharmaceuticals, drugs, and antibiotic overuse can certainly cause immune system dysfunction. If there's gastrointestinal dysbiosis, environmental toxin exposure, particularly heavy metals and pesticides, herbicides, food sensitivities, food allergies, and food intolerance can certainly lower the immune system. Liver dysfunction, chronic systemic infections, think of lupus, autoimmune disease, other condition. Elevated stress levels, including physical and emotional components of that elevated stress, can need to be addressed. A lack of exercise. Exercise can certainly improve immune response. Oxidative stress, the tissue's DNA damage, you can think of it that way, and certainly hormonal imbalances, particularly cortisol and insulin imbalances can certainly lower the immune system. These are things to think about when assessing your patient or trying to increase their immune response and help support the immune system. So now I want to talk about lab testing that's available through Evexia Diagnostics for consideration. So let's get started. There's a couple of panels I want to start out with here. The first one that they offer is called the Complete Wellness Panel. And you see the list of analytes on this slide, certainly the CBC, Comprehensive Metabolic Panel I talked about, cortisol, there's a C-reactive protein. You certainly want to take a look at that. Insulin, you want to look at the thyroid dysfunction. Certainly hypothyroidism can lead to allergic response and certainly low immune response as well. Vitamin D is important for the immune system and immune system response, as well as looking at calcium and for bones. But you think of it this way as we're going through this webinar. Now, when I look at the panel, what I've done is dissect out particular profiles and analytes related to immune system assessment. So as you see, I start with the CBC. That's going to check for anemia and the white blood cell count. In particular, is there high neutrophil count or low lymphocyte count, like I mentioned, which is common for individuals that present with this disease. The comprehensive metabolic panel assessing for liver function. Are there elevated liver enzymes? C-reactive protein, inflammation. Like I said earlier, that is very common with individuals that are susceptible to this disease. Vitamin D levels, as you probably know, low vitamin D is associated with immune system dysfunction. It's going to check for kidney dysfunction. It's going to check for thyroid function and GGT, gamma glutamyl transferase. That's a great enzyme to take a look at because it's involved in gallbladder, liver assessment, oxidative stress, and certainly environmental toxin burden. If you have a high GGT, you might want to consider ordering a whole blood glutathione as a standalone or latched on to one of these tests. And here's the reason for that. As you probably are aware, glutathione, it can directly neutralize uh, oxidative substances such as hydroxyl radicals and superoxide radicals. In other words, it's an antioxidant. Glutathione also regenerates vitamin C and vitamin E, which is extremely important. It's involved in liver detoxification. It helps transport mercury out of the cells, which is extremely important, and it's involved in the regulation of cellular and proliferative apoptosis. So keep that in mind. So bottom line here, where GGT is high, aside from liver gallbladder, think of environmental stress or glutathione being used up because this will be high. So you might want to take a look at glutathione. There is a test later, a couple of slides down the road here, that we'll take a look at glutathione. So I'll show you that as well. So there's many ways to take a look at that. The next panel is the comprehensive wellness panel as opposed to the complete wellness panel. That includes more analytes. So there's more analytes to take a look at. So let's go ahead and do that. So here they are. These are in addition to the complete wellness. I've pulled out several analytes that are included in this panel that you certainly might want to take a look at. First, as you see here, it's in the blue text box, is coenzyme Q10. Now, coenzyme Q10 is needed for energy, as you know, and also acts as an antioxidant. And if this enzyme is low, right, you might want to think about, well, there are high levels of oxidative stress going on, which can lower the immune system. Also, you got to think about individuals on statin drugs, because statin drugs can lower the amount of coenzyme Q10 in the body. And as you can see, it is in this panel. Next is in this panel is what's known as F2 isoproteins. Now, that's a urine test. That is a great test looking at oxidative stress because the measurement of this analyte, it's advantageous over other markers of lipid peroxidation, and that's due to their stability and detectability in human tissue. So that gives you a good window into oxidative stress. Next, of course, is omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acid levels. Extremely important to take a look at that. You're probably aware of the proper balance between these fatty acids is needed for the proper inflammation response, but also the proper anti-inflammatory response. So if there's higher omega-6 than omega-3, this individual could be in a state of chronic inflammation, which will lower the immune response. Next is zinc. And there are several ways to take a look at zinc. You can analyze it in red blood cells. You can look at it in the plasma or in the serum. The way I like to look at it, and which is on this test, is RBC zinc, looking at the zinc in the cell, looking at the red blood cell. And the reason for that is because that tends to reflect zinc nutriture over a long period of time rather than in the serum or plasma, which reflects more recent changes in zinc status. So it's going to give you more of how has zinc been, over 3 or 4 months. Think of it as a hemoglobin A1C. Next are the deaminated gliadin antibodies that's in this profile, IgA and IgG. And certainly you're probably aware that we're looking for celiac disease, potential of gluten sensitivity, both of which can cause a problem and lower the immune system. People can react to this and it can cause a myriad of conditions. So this analyte is on there as well. And remember, a lot of these analytes can be ordered a standalone as well, but it's great that they're included in this comprehensive wellness panel. Next, I want to go over a list of clinically relevant tests for you to consider. Now, I've already talked about the CBC, Comprehensive Metabolic Panel, to look at cortisol, DHEA, so forth. So I want to get into more details on some more of these, the tests that I didn't mention, so you can really take a look and find, do I need to order this test based on the patient history, based on the presenting symptoms that the patient comes to your office with. So let's start, let's take a look at these. The first three you see are on this slide. The first one is called eosinophil cationic protein, and that's also known as ribonuclease 3. So what's the deal with this particular analyte? Well, a clue is eosinophil. Now, eosinophils, are effector cells, and they're going to play a role in allergy and actually non-allergic inflammation as well. One of the prominent features you may recall of these eosinophils are the large um, cytoplasmic granules, and there are four basic components, and the most plentiful is called, believe it or not, eosinophil cationic protein, ECP. And the deal is that when they've studied that, this particular protein plays a major role in regulating mucosal and immune cells and may directly fight against parasitic uh, infection, bacterial infection, and of course, viral infections. So that's one analyte you definitely want to give consideration to. Next is the influenza A and B antibodies quantitative. And as you probably guessed, that this is going to detect antibodies to influenza A and B. And that's valuable for epidemiological uh, uh, study, but also for planning therapy. Any of these individuals have coexisting viruses, if they're debilitated, more susceptible to the coronavirus. So I think you got the message there. Next is a cytokine called interleukin 2. Now, this cytokine is produced primarily by activated T lymphocytes, and it plays a role in promoting what's known as clonal expansion of antigen-specific cytotoxic and suppressor T cells. That's a mouthful. Bottom line here is that this cytokine has been shown to mediate multiple immune responses of a variety of cell types. The bottom line, again, is that it reflects immune system response. It's a good idea to take a look at it. So that's another analyte for consideration. Next are looking at the overall immunoglobulins in the patient's serum, and you see it's listed here, looking at the quantitative amount of IgA, IgG, IgM, where it basically should be. So this is a little snippet of a lab test results for you to take a look at. The results here you see IgG 900, and it should be between 700 and 1600 milligrams per deciliter. IgA normally should be between 87 and 352 milligrams per deciliter. IgM normally should be between 26 and 217 milligrams per deciliter. So if these are off when you get the test results back for your individual, if you decide to order this test, you can say, you know what, their immune system is not up for the challenge because we should have a certain level of immunoglobulins in our system, ready, the troops ready to latch on to things that are, are not so good, that can cause illness. Next one is called mannose binding lectin. So what is that? So this analyte is produced in the liver and it's secreted into the blood. And what it does, it plays an important role in innate immune system response against invading organisms, microorganisms, viruses, bacteria, fungus, and protozoa. So that's a great analyte to take a look at that as well. Now, determining that concentration can be helpful for suspected immune deficiency or deficient cases in immunosuppressed individuals. So you might want to take a look at that one as well. Another analyte is called myeloperoxidase. Now, that plays an important role in innate host defense mechanism. So this analyte, like it says on the slide, it's a hemoprotein, and it is present in leukocytes and has potent antimicrobial activities against a broad range of invading parasites and also pathogens. So you can use that as a biomarker. The next biomarker to look at are natural killer cells and also what's known as activated T cell profile, and it's going to look at that interleukin 2 and what's known as interleukin 2 receptor. So natural killer cells are those large granular lymphocytes. You may remember those from way back when, and they're going to mediate cytotoxicity against viral infected and also malignant cells as well. So this would give you an idea of when you order this test is what is the count of these natural killer cells. So it's really good test to take a look at. So I want you to remember that these natural killer cells, again, they're responsible for the destruction of virally infected cells, also tumor cells or cancer cells, and also antibody-dependent cellular cytotoxicity. Great test to take a look at. So the next analyte you see here is called Neopterin. Now, what is this stuff here? So this is a compound. It's produced by macrophages, and it serves as a marker for cellular immune system activity. And this is kind of a neat one because measurable levels of this particular analyte have been detected in both the serum and also the urine in patients suffering from a variety of malignancies as well as viral infections, and that's what we're talking about. The next individual test, and it's really not an individual test, it is the respiratory pathogen profile comprehensive. It uses PCR testing, polymerase chain reaction, and this test provides simultaneous qualitative detection and identification of multiple respiratory viral and bacterial nucleic acids in that nasopharyngeal swab that's obtained. In other words, it's looking for respiratory tract infections overall via PCR testing. The next analyte is a cytokine you may be familiar with, tumor necrosis factor alpha or TNF alpha. And this cytokine is going to be elevated in the serum and plasma in cases of various infectious diseases, also sepsis and autoimmune diseases. So another great one to take a look at. Next is looking at vitamin A. Now, vitamin A and its metabolites are going to play a critical role in both the innate and adaptive immunity. You should be aware of that by now, hopefully. So subclinical vitamin A deficiencies can cause an increased risk of defection based on that because it's needed. Vitamin A is needed for, again, innate and adaptive immunity. So I want you to remember that the body must require vitamin A from the diet or supplementation to sustain all of those processes as aside from the immune function. Remember, vitamin A is needed for vision, it's needed for tissue differentiation, for reproduction, embryonic development, and also maintaining healthy skin and barrier functions. So vitamin A is aside from the immune system, what we're talking about here is needed for a whole bunch of other physiological processes in the body. Next is vitamin C, and I guess everyone knows vitamin C is highly effective. It's a highly effective antioxidant, and it's going to protect the body against oxidative species. Now, remember, the immune cells are going to generate oxidative species to go ahead and kill those pathogens. And vitamin C has also been shown to stimulate the production and function of white blood cells. So it's a dual effect here. It's going to be an antioxidant, but also a stimulant to get the production and function of the white blood cells, up and running. So a great supplement to take a look at in the literature of your patient. Now, the one underneath that is called vitamin C with dilution, in which results are expected to be relatively high due to the high dose vitamin C. So that's the one that somebody is on, high dose vitamin C. An example would be cancer therapy. So here's another look at that, just as a reminder. Look at the sample report of LabCorp, again, which is available at Evexia. This is the 2019 novel coronavirus, and it is determined by what's known as nucleic acid amplification, NAA. And just as a reminder, the specimen is the nasopharyngeal swab in a viral transport media. You have to obtain that. You don't do that at the lab. Like it says, turnaround time is about 3 to 4 days, and that's going to detect this new virus, the SARS-CoV-2. That's going to help with that diagnosis. And here's a reminder, just to bring that point across again, that individuals seeking testing for this virus should not visit LabCorp locations who request that the test must be ordered by a physician or authorized healthcare provider. Again, LabCorp does not currently collect the specimen. Your healthcare provider needs to do that. And then here's a look at the tests, by the way, the sample test results. So now I want to move over into some specialty tests that you might want to consider. Again, this is in an effort to take a look at the immune system response from many different angles. So keep that in mind as we go through a lot of these tests, and it's certainly up to you to choose what's the most appropriate test or profile for your patient. This is just wonderfully laid out for you, and to get an idea of which one may I want to do to this individual based on their history. So here goes. The first one I want to talk about that is offered by Evexia is the Genova diagnostic. It's called the immunogenomic profile, and as you can see, the analytes that are listed all the way on the right part of this slide. Tumor necrosis factor alpha is listed there as well as the interleukins that you see there. So this test is going to evaluate genetic variations in genes that modulate immune and the inflammatory activity. That's really the power of this test. So let's take a look at the sample report. Right, and as you can see in the sample report here, it's going to take a look at the genetic potential for chronic infections, taking a look at the cytokines, and overall the immune response. But it's important to understand that when they look at these SNPs, single nucleotide polymorphisms, they indicate risk, but not certainty. So I want you to keep that in mind looking at this test. Again, it's a wonderful test. The next profile to consider was what's known as the ION profile. Now, what that stands for is individual optimal nutrition. This profile is going to measure over 125 key nutrient biomarkers that can identify suboptimal nutrition. So if there's suboptimal nutrition, the immune system is not going to be working properly. The immune system needs a whole bunch of things. It certainly needs vitamins, minerals. It needs the correct amount of protein to be up and running and working properly. And doing this test, by the way, if there's a whole bunch of suboptimal nutrition, I want you to think that it can be caused, and it can be the root cause of complex chronic conditions that are just not getting well because the patient is debilitated to a certain extent via nutritional deficiencies. So, and the list of analytes, as you see here, it looks at amino acids, nutrients, toxic elements, looks at coenzyme Q10, vitamin markers, DNA, oxidative stress markers, vitamin D, fatty acids, and organic acids. Some of the indications, as you see, are listed on the slide here that you may want to order this test: mood disorders, depression, anxiety, fatigue, digestive complaints, chronic pain, inflammatory conditions, musculoskeletal migraines, cardiovascular disease, weight issues. But it can also be ordered for general health and optimal fitness. So that's something to be considered as well. Here's a look at the very easy to read panel when you get that back, or lab report, excuse me, the ION panel lab report. Take a look at. It's very easy to read, so you get an idea of what is going on. This is the amino acid section of that. The report does have obviously a lot more pages than what you see here. So here's another valuable test to consider that's offered. Is called the NutrEval test. As you can see next to that on the top there, it says FMV, first morning void, and also plasma. So what this test does and what it's concerned about is essentially it is going to look for a nutritional testing or a nutritional tool to assess, again, another chronic or complex chronic illness, as well as those who are seeking to improve health. It's going to look at 5 key areas that are outlined in the slide. What are the antioxidant levels, B vitamin levels, mineral levels, essential fatty acid levels, and also digestive support needs, whether there's a need for pancreatic acids, pancreatic enzymes, or probiotics to help support the system. Now, this is the NutrEval test, and this is the first morning void. Now, this test, as opposed to the plasma test, which I'll be talking about on the next slide, this is purportedly more helpful for those with digestive issues. So that's really the main thing if you're looking at, well, should I get the NutrEval first morning void test or the plasma test? If there's more digestive issues with the individuals, it looks like there's going to be a lot more information with the first morning void as opposed to the NutrEval plasma test, which is more helpful for looking at if there are mood disorders, neurotransmitter imbalances. The difference between the two is that these two tests is that the plasma is looking at plasma amino acids, the first morning void is looking at urinary amino acids. So that's the difference between those two. Here's a sample report, really, really easy to take a look at. Great report because it's going to give you the results right on the page, what's normal, borderline, and what's with a high need for. In this case, you see alpha lipoic acid has a high need for. These are the borderline. It gives you a suggested supplement schedule and also goes over analyte by analyte on this, meaning is it high, low, is there a high need, and is it normal? So it's extremely helpful and very educational to your patient as well using this test. Now, this is another kind of a offshoot of the NutrEval test, and this is called the one FMV test, optimal nutritional evaluation. The difference between this and the other test is that this does not, you don't need a blood draw for this. This is strictly a urine test that is going to look at very similar analytes, except you're not going to get a readout on the essential fatty acids. But once again, great test. It is effective for patients experiencing mood disorders, fatigue, digestive complaints you see on the slide, weight issues, dietary, general health. it can help you target nutrition for the individuals. So if you just need to do a urine test, that this is the one. Again, what you don't have on here is looking at the essential fatty acids, but you can get wonderful information over the one test, the optimal nutritional evaluation. I think it's a great test. And here's a sample of that test, very similar to the NutriVal test as well. Next, another test to consider, and that's going to be based on the patient history and presenting symptoms, like I said, is this what's known as the oxidative stress analysis 2.0 blood test. And yes, it is a blood test. Now, it's going to take a look at oxidative stress and used to assess that equilibrium between oxidative damage and antioxidant reserve. There are many conditions that this is very, very helpful for. Right off the bat, I mean, I hone in on neurodegenerative diseases because there's definitely oxidative stress related with that, but a host of other conditions that you see on the slide: rheumatoid arthritis, cancer, macular degeneration, diabetes, atherosclerosis, chronic fatigue syndrome, and just a whole bunch of conditions that you really want to take out this oxidative damage. We want to look at that as opposed to, do we have an antioxidant reserve? And you can treat from that point or prescribe from that point. So this shows a copy of what you'll get back after the blood draw. It's going to look at, I know this says protective here, but I like to consider this like reserve. What is the reserve of glutathione? As you see here, it looks like glutathione. It looks at cysteine, sulfate, the cysteine sulfate ratio. It'll take a look at those ratios and indicate, is everything low, higher, and green's like in the center, everything is good. Next, it's going to look at the functionality of protective enzymes. It's going to look at glutathione peroxidase. It's going to look at the level of superoxide dismutase, because these enzymes are extremely important as it relates to antioxidant reserve and squelching the oxidative radicals and oxidative damage. And finally, it's going to take a look at the tissue damage, and that's looking at the level of lipid peroxides. As you can see here, this individual is very high on lipid peroxides, meaning that they're susceptible to quite a bit of damage, including DNA damage. So it's a good test to take a look at. And what you would do with this is assess their literature with regard to antioxidants, change the diet, prescribe accordingly. And as you can read on the slide, that this test is effective for chronic pain and inflammatory conditions, cardiovascular conditions, aging, and neurodegenerative conditions, disorders. And finally, the last test that I want to share with you is known as a SpectraCell test, also known as the micronutrient test. Now, the thing about this test is that this test looks at the lymphocytes. Right? Lymphocytes hang around in the body for about 3 to 6 months. So it's actually looking at the vitamins, the minerals, amino acids, fatty acids, antioxidants, carbohydrate, metabolites, metabolism, and all of that in that cell, because the cell's been hanging around for a while. And it says, okay, what do we have here? Looking at the lymphocyte. So I look at it as dissecting that lymphocyte, because it should have a certain amount of all of these nutrients in it. And if it does not, it can be that the individual is deficient and is. And this is a really wonderful test to take a look at, because you're getting a look at what's going on inside the cell, not just looking at plasma levels and urinary levels of metabolites and so forth. You're looking at the function of what is going on, or the amount of micronutrients inside of an active lymphocyte, and say, okay, what's going on, what's normal, what's low, and what can I do from this point? So that's kind of the beauty of this test, because again, it looks at the biochemistry, not just what's in the serum of what's going on. So that's kudos to that test. What you'll get back if you order this test solely is the results at a glance. It'll take a look at chromium, glucose, insulin, glutathione, again, a thing called an immunodex, which I'll be talking about. We'll look at vitamins and minerals and things that are borderline as well. It's a very, very complete report for you to take a look at. Now, what's kind of special about this test is that it gives you what's known as the Spectrox and the Immunodex. Now, the Spectrox gives you a level of the overall antioxidant function of the lymphocyte. Right, that percentage is going to give you a total of antioxidant measurements, not just of one or two specific values. So it's going to measure the ability of the cells to withstand attack from free radicals and other antioxidant stress. In other words, another way to look at the antioxidant reserve. And it's going to allow you, if this is very low, for early intervention. Next is this immunodex that you see right here. Now, this is an indicator of the patient's T lymphocyte or response. Are they going to have a good response? If it's low, their immune system may not be responding properly. In other words, if this starts getting down into this gray area here, this patient certainly is borderline right here, or that this results as borderline, indicating that there is a need for more investigation. Essentially, the immune index is an indication of how well a person's T lymphocytes are functioning by measuring their growth response. That's what they do, and that's something done at the lab without getting too technical on this, because they're looking for what's known as a mitogenic stimulation response to these cells. Are these cells able to respond properly? So, they put them in a petri dish and do their magic on it and get an idea: are the immune cells functioning properly? Are they up for the challenge? So that's the beauty of that particular test.
Thank you, Dr. Sedano, for that important information. Now, before we move on to review some options available for supplementation support, it is imperative to note that currently there are no pharmaceutical or natural medicines approved by the FDA to specifically treat COVID-19. Immune Essentials Plus is a comprehensive, synergistic formula that combines herbs, mushroom extracts, and other natural compounds to help the body maintain a normal immune system response. This immune support formula is extremely safe and effective, is suitable for both acute and chronic applications, and is also appropriate for all age groups. As you can see here, some of the significant botanicals included in this formula are echinacea, astragalus, elderberry, and green tea, all of which are standardized to a very high level of its key active component. Also, Immune Essentials Plus includes an impressive combination of the immune supportive mushrooms cordyceps, shiitake, maitake, and reishi. Silver Max is a formula composed of pure silver complexed with purified water. This incredibly powerful, non-toxic form of silver has broad spectrum effects and supports the immune system. It also helps the body maintain a healthy barrier against the intrusion of unwanted organisms. Unlike prescription antibiotics, however, Silvermax targets specific organisms while sparing the body's beneficial bacteria. Additionally, it does not interfere with antibiotics and may even help them to work more effectively. As you can see here, this is a very simple formula, and there are no known side effects or contraindications, which is excellent because that means it is safe for all individuals. Plus, the silver in this product will not build up in the body and can be safely used long term. S-acetylglutathione complete is important because glutathione is needed for proper mitochondrial function and therefore energy production. Glutathione also protects against DNA damage, helps bind to heavy metals, is involved in the removal of toxins, and enhances the function of the immune system. As you can see, this straightforward formula contains N-acetylcysteine, S-acetylglutathione, and vitamin B6. The acetyl group protects against glutathione breakdown in the gastrointestinal tract, which is vital because of the role that glutathione plays as a potent antioxidant which protects against free radical damage to the cells. C plus flavonoids is a combination of vitamin C and plant bioflavonoids, which increase the strength and regulate the permeability of the capillaries and work together with vitamin C. Vitamin C is needed for immune system support, bone maintenance, collagen formation, and acts as an antioxidant. As you can see, this formula includes vitamin C along with quercetin, hesperidin, and rutin. Multicomplex Plus is a special formula which provides maximal absorption and bioavailability while also reducing the possibility of causing loose stools or other gastrointestinal discomforts. As you can see here, this highly absorbable formula is a full-spectrum multivitamin that also contains chelated minerals and is iron and copper-free. Max Antiox Complete is a comprehensive antioxidant formula that combines some of nature's most powerful herbs and spices. As you can see here, there is a robust list including vitamin A, curcumin, garlic, ginkgo, acerola extract, grapeseed extract, resveratrol, sage, rosemary, clove, and lycopene, just to name a few. Zinc Max is of interest because zinc is needed for the proper function of all cells in the body and is vital for a properly functioning immune system. Surprisingly, zinc is one of several nutrients that is not naturally produced or stored in the body, and as a result, requires regular supplementation. More importantly, zinc supplementation has been shown to significantly reduce the risk of infections and promote an appropriate immune response in older adults. As you can see, Zinc Max provides 30 milligrams of chelated zinc in each capsule, along with B2, B6, molybdenum, taurine, and malic acid. Essential Protein Beef Plus is significant because protein enhances and improves the function of the immune system, since the immune system is heavily dependent on protein to manufacture both white blood cells and antibodies. As a result, an individual's protein status becomes an area of concern when faced with immune challenges. As you can see, this is a high biological value protein supplement, which is important because many people, especially vegans, females, and those dealing with protein malabsorption, may be challenged by a new immune threat. Also, Essential Protein Beef Plus is ultra-filtered beef protein delivered in the form of peptides that allows for easier absorption. Monolaurin has demonstrated antibacterial, antiviral, and antimicrobial properties. Studies have also shown that monolauric acid can disintegrate the protective viral envelope, thereby preventing it from attaching and entering host cells and ultimately kill the virus. MLA can also help the immune system recognize a pathogen by increasing immunogenicity, creating an additional antigenic epitope that can be recognized by T helper cells. This dramatically improves the immune response time and allows for a quicker resolution of infection. Before we conclude today's presentation, I want to briefly review how to order testing for your patients through Evexia Diagnostics. Step 1. Simply log into your Evexia Diagnostics account and click on Evexia link Lab Orders. Step 2. Find your patient or add a new patient. Step 3. Click Add New Order to gain access to the test menu and order the desired panel. And finally, Step 4. Review and confirm your order once it has been added to your cart and simply place the order. We're available to assist you Monday through Friday during our extended business hours from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Eastern Time by calling 888-852-2723 or reach us anytime through our website at evexiadiagnostics.com or via email at info@evexiadiagnostics.com. We look forward to hearing from you soon. Thank you again for joining us for this special webinar presentation. Until next time, we wish you all the best on your pathway to wellness.